book where it seems like he's really inclined to abort this baby. You also suggested, Jacob, that perhaps they come up with some sort of three-way arrangement kind of relationship. You know, was all of this stuff sort of to give Edward a little more edge?
You know, I'm actually surprised no one ever, the editing, they never said a word to me about that. And I kind of thought someone said, this is too much. For me, it was, when I write the story, it's not like I'm thinking about what I'm doing. It just is what flows naturally. And I was surprised as well at how far gone Edward was descend into madness in his quest to save Bella's life.
Would he really have shared her?
He would have done anything to keep her alive. That was all that mattered. And it was just amazing to me how much that really meant, that there was no line at all.
Some people have suggested, though, that in being so adamant about keeping the baby, that this is perhaps maybe a pro-life book.
See, and I get that a lot. People ask, what's the message? What moral is there to the story? And there never is one with my books. You know, people find them, and that's fine. You know, reader interpretation is valid. But for me, it's always just about the adventure. I want to go and have fun. Now, obviously, your own personal experience always comes into play. I've had 3 kids. With every one of them, I would have given my life 10 times over for that child I'd never met before. So that, to me, is natural. And in fact, with my first baby, they told me I was having a miscarriage. And so I went through a week of sobbing in bed and not moving because I'd only been pregnant for 2 months, but I was so ready to do anything to keep that child. So I've had that experience, and with my kids being as amazing as they are, I just can't imagine.
And was pregnancy ever scary for you? I mean, it seems awfully scary for Bella.
I was very healthy. There were very few moments. It was never about my life. And I actually think that would be an easier scare to deal with.
Given some of the more mature themes in the book, we just talked about them, is this still a young adult book?
I've never written a young adult book in my life. You know, the books are set in high school, but I've never written them thinking, I'm writing this for a 16-year-old or a 13-year-old. I always write for myself, and I'm in my 30s. So these books have never been a young adult project to me. I think it's awesome that the kids enjoy them and that they find something in Bella that they can relate to, even though I'm not 17. I still apparently remember that clearly enough that I can do it right. But, you know, I was concerned with this last one. I didn't let my son read it, and he's 11. He can read that when he's a little bit older, and I feel like he can handle it. And I do think that parents should be very involved in what their kids read. They should know what it is so you can talk about it and know if it's appropriate.
But did you ever think maybe I should backpedal certain parts, given that even though I'm not writing young adult books, there are young adults reading?
You know, it's hard to say on that because every kid is different, and some of the books that are for YA are so far beyond what I've done with this book, you know, really pushing that envelope a lot further. For me, I just don't let it interfere with the story. I think about that stuff after the fact. The story is what matters. I want to tell it in a way that I'm happy with it. And then you stop and say, okay, does this book need a warning on it? And I was kind of for that. It didn't go that way, but I would have been happy with a 15 and up label on it.
Really?
Yes.
What do you think your fan reaction would have been if there had been some sort of sticker?
I don't know. I don't know. I think that maybe they would have been upset. Because there's a lot of kids who are 13 who can handle a lot more than I could when I was 13. So that's why it's hard to put an age on it. Every kid's different. Everybody's at a different level with what they can handle.
Do you ever mind being referred to as a Mormon writer?
I don't mind. It's kind of a strange thing to me because you don't do that with other authors. It's like, this is a Catholic author and this is a Jewish author and this is a Lutheran author because nobody cares. So I'm always surprised that that's newsworthy. It just seems like such a strange thing to me.
But doesn't offend you?
Oh, no. I am Mormon. It's a huge part of who I am. I'm surprised that people find that as interesting as it is.
But it's helpful to you from Jacob's perspective.
That was a decision that I came to after, you know, I wrote the first draft, set it aside, I wrote Eclipse and New Moon in between, and there was always this problem with that section of the book from Bella's perspective, because she's stuck in a room, and there's all this action going on outside the room that she's not a part of, and it just feels like the story was somewhere else. You know, for the first time, the story really was away from Bella. And there's so much that you just wouldn't know and you couldn't see, and the only person that could give you the real perspective was Jacob. And then once I started writing from his perspective, it was the most fun I ever had. I loved writing that section, really my favorite part.
Why is that?
Because he's funny. You know, all along when I'm writing these books, I'm hearing everybody else's thoughts. You know, you're only giving Bella's, but I know what everyone else is thinking and not saying aloud. And Jacob's always just been really sarcastic in his head and kind of bratty, but just hilarious. And so to get a chance to let everyone else see that and write it out and let him make his jokes and be sarcastic, it was a lot of fun for me.
And it was able to give the reader sort of a glimpse into the whole pack and their that mentality and how they communicated.
Well, there's so much excitement in that, and it's so different, I think, than what people realize, that I really wanted people to have that pack experience.
And I have to tell you, I've always been firmly Team Edward. This was the first time I really sort of started to understand Jacob and get to him.
Well, and that's part of it. I mean, I was glad to have the chance. I'd been planning it before there was this whole anti-Jacob movement that I never saw coming. So surprised that happened. And I think it's because I was hearing all those things that he's saying in his head and the things that he's not saying out loud. And nobody else was, so they didn't ever get to know him.
But there's also, I think there's a little bit of controversy with the kiss. Jacob and Bella's kiss, where he sort of forces it on her. And it seems like people maybe took that as Jacob's pushy.
Well, Jacob is pushy. For me, Jacob is a 16-year-old boy stuck in this situation that is so too grown up for him. And he's in love with the girl, but even more important than that is that he's trying to save the girl's life. And it really pushes him past what he would even consider appropriate behavior, because he's doing anything he can. You know, the fun with fiction is you take people and you put them in situations they can't handle. That's when it gets interesting.
Were there any unforeseen complications with being in his head rather than in Bella's?
Not really, because the way he is in the story, you get to see all of the good Bella and Edward stuff. And I actually found it really interesting to look at that from the outside, but you also got everything else that you couldn't have seen if you were just with Bella. Plus the Rosalie and Jacob interaction is one of my favorite things I've ever written.
Hilarious.
So much fun with that.
I kept laughing out loud at 2 o'clock in the morning. But you established in Eclipse that it was actually Jacob and not Sam who was meant to be the alpha of the wolves. How did you decide that this was the moment you would have him step up?
With this decision for him, because, you know, with his character, it's not what he wanted to do. So it had to be something so extreme. I didn't think about it so much in advance, but when it started coming together as a story, it was just really obvious that this is going to be the tipping point for him.